Hi, I'm Isabel Ross with Peak Endurance Coaching, and today I am with Luke Nelson from Health High Performance. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, good to be back again for a repeat performance. Obviously, I didn't crash and burn the first time, so
no, that's right.
Otherwise, I would have got the invite back.
But, everyone was really loved your information and find it very relevant for runners, which is why we're here today to talk about calf strains.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about calf strains?
Certainly can. So calf strains are, they're the second most common soft tissue injury. We tend
for runners?
See in runners. Yeah, so we tend to see hamstrings are up there, but they tend to be more for sprinting. But for your endurance runners, we do tend to see the calves playing a big role. And one of the reasons for that is that they are just so important for runners. In fact, they are the most important muscle for runner. And in fact, if anyone's been following me on social media, they would know my love for the calf muscles.
Yes, I've been noticing that.
And they do a tremendous amount of work, and especially the lower calf muscle, the soleus, that does up to 6 to 8 times body weight. Wow. So a huge amount of load that's carried by that muscle. So it's a big one for runners.
But it's interesting because as runners, we focus so much on glutes and hamstrings.
Yeah.
And yet you're saying it's actually the calves we should be focusing on.
It is. It's the calves, and so one of my favourite images is from Happy Gilmore, and there's the it's all on the hips, and no, it's actually the calves, and that is a common thing that we get runners coming in to see us that have been told by another therapist, or they've got the conception themselves that it is the glutes are the most important. But in terms of contribution to running, the calves are the number one. So, and the glutes are actually right down on the pecking list. In fact, we'll have a little a table later on that shows the breakdown of all those muscles.
Interesting. All right. So when a runner ends up with a calf strain, what are some of the things that they're doing wrong in the handling of this?
Well, that's right. And that's what I thought we'd talk about today, because there are common mistakes that we see that runners make, and so we thought we'd clarify some of those up, and so that for all our listeners out there that do suffer a calf strain, they can make sure that they can go through and check through these things to make sure that they make a successful return. Because not only, unfortunately, do calf strains result in can result in considerable time off running, but they've got a high rate of recurrence. And if you don't look after them the first time, they've got a tendency to come back. And it's something that we see here, is we see a lot of runners that get those recurrent strains.
And I'm imagining that if you have this current sort of ongoing issue, that's going to negatively be affecting your running. So even though if you're running through it, you're surely, because you use your calf push off so much, you're not getting the power that you need and that sort of thing.
That's exactly right. So that can sometimes be one of the symptoms that runners get. I mean, the most obvious one is, my calf's really sore during a run, or ping, there it goes.
Yes.
But unfortunately, because the calf muscles don't have the same nerve supply that, say, a hamstring does, you don't tend to feel them as much. So when you do a hammy, it's like, I've been shot in the back of the leg.
Yeah.
But calves don't often give that sensation. They can feel a bit like, it feels a little bit like a cramp, or it just doesn't feel right there, or just the day after a run feeling like, I've got a bit of, quite a bit of DOMS there. So there's some of the things that can mislead runners into thinking that there's, that there is a calf strain there. So they're the common symptoms. Sometimes feeling a bit like a cramp. The obvious one is, bang, I've just been jabbed in the in the calf there, and it can either be high in the calf in what's called the gastrocs, or down lower in the soleus. So and it can be 50-50, and sometimes you can have injuries in both areas.
So some signs and symptoms to keep an eye out for there.
Yeah,
all right.
absolutely.
So back to what we were going to talk about. Yeah, what are some of the things that runners are doing wrong when dealing with a calf strain?
So look, the first thing that we find, if we go through our slides here, so the first thing that we find that runners do is they do nothing. Okay, there's a good example.
Oh, come on,
there.
That looks like fun.
It does look like fun, but that's more for your recovery after a Sunday long run, and not after you've done a week of mileage, or post race, as this guy's obviously doing. But it's not the example of what you want to be doing after an injury.
But a lot of runners do that, is they think, well, if I just take time off from running, it will fix itself magically.
Yep.
It'll fix.
That's right.
No,
big no, and that's probably one of the big things that we see wrong, and probably the worst thing that you can do, because what happens when we injure calf muscle, so you get tearing of the fibers, and the body comes in there and it lays down tissue there to form a nice scar. Now, what we need to do then is we need to stress that scar enough to create a nice knitting and strong tissue. If we just simply do what this guy does and put the feet up and do nothing, then what will happen is that you get a really weak scar. Then you go back to running, and then bang, there it goes again.
And you're basically not just having a weak scar, but you're weakening all the muscles around it by doing nothing, aren't you?
Exactly right. So you've got a double whammy there. You get the lack of strength in the scar, then you get that atrophy in that muscle, and then also a loss of fitness as well. So it's really important, and I think runners.
And if you're eating all those chips, you're probably putting on a few kgs.
That's exactly right, and coming back a bit heavier, and then like some people have the COVID kilos. It is not good. So that's the first one, the first cross there. Okay. We don't want to move.
So don't just do nothing.
No, absolutely. Okay. Do something, and we'll sort of talk about what that something might look like. So that's our first step. But and we should also precede this as well too, but making sure that what you've got is actually a calf strain. So that's where having a proper diagnosis says that yes, that is a calf strain, because there are a number of things that can imitate a calf. Referral from nerve structures, so issues in the back, a compartment syndrome, those sort of things there, popliteal artery entrapment. So they're things that not as likely, but that can still give the sensation of it.
The first part of not doing nothing is getting it diagnosed. Yes,
getting it diagnosed, and then your treating practitioner should then be able to guide you onto the path of what you should be doing. So if we go on to our next one. So the next one is just a few calf raises will fix it. And this is often, it can be therapist driven, but it's often a runner that's just thought, I've done my calf, I'm just going to do some calf raises. Yeah. And there's a couple of problems with that. And the first being that it's not enough load. Doing a calf raise is not enough
Even
load.
Even if I do 20 or 30?
No. It's still, obviously it's a reflection of some strength that you can do that. But what we actually need to do is we need to go heavier. And this is the table that I was talking about earlier on before, that was done by Tim Dawn's study. And you can see here highlighted down the bottom there, the soleus. And that does, even from slower speed, so just under 5-minute Ks of running, we're still, just under seven times body weight of force going through that soleus. And then if we look up, we mentioned before the glutes, you have a look at the glute max up the top there, 0.38. So not a lot there when we're doing those slower speeds running. And then we can see the bit of an increase with that calf muscle there. So the thing is that in order to replicate that amount of force, so that 7 times body weight of force, we really need to be doing weighted and heavy calf raises. So it's not just enough to be doing it, single leg without any weight. We do need to be putting some weight on, and we need to try and get those reps a bit lower down. So we need to be building strength in there. So ideally keeping it around that, even the 6 to 8 rep range.
I was going to say probably 6 to 8,
Spot on. So going heavy with that, and that can be a matter of putting a backpack on and just filling it with stuff. It can be having a garden bucket and holding onto that. If you've got weights at home, doing that, or obviously if you're in a gym, even better. You can use the plenty of equipment that are there in the gym. And my preference for these as well too. So if we especially if we want to be biasing more that lower calf, that soleus, then we need to be doing things like a seated calf raise. So that's on a seated calf raise machine or a leg extension machine at the gym. If we're going to be doing it at home, then what we want to be doing is we just want to make sure that we've got a bend in the knee there and a bend of up to 60 degrees when we're doing our calf raises.
It seems counterintuitive that when you've got an injury to be loading it with weight, but you're saying that is actually what helps it.
It is, and we're obviously doing things at a safe level. So we're not sort of saying, when someone's got a high grade calf, go out there and load it up. There's obviously a progression to get to those stages. But this is where we eventually want to head. And we find sometimes early on that they can tolerate quite heavy. It's more sort of the faster and explosive stuff that they just can't handle. So early on, sometimes you can load them up quite heavy. But that's sort of where we eventually want to head with that weight.
Yep.
So that's firstly with the strength. So calf raises, you need to be adding some weight on.
And how many sets? When we talked about 3 6 to 8
Yep.
reps, how many sets would you be doing?
Usually go for 3 to 4. So
Yep.
3 to 4 sets there, and trying to get that done 2 to 3 times a week. And so, you know, whilst you're injured and for all the runners out there, you can use that as a time to, you know, to build on your strength and pick up an extra strength session there when you might have been doing, hopefully doing, 1 or 2 a week there. You can look at adding another one of those in to work on some of these strength losses and maybe some other issues that you've got going on at the same time. So that's our first thing with doing that. The second thing about calf raises is that they don't replicate the rate of force that we need. So first of all, we need to develop, we need good strength in through that calf during running. But the second thing was we need to be able to develop that really quickly because with running, when our feet are on the ground for anywhere between 0.25 to 0.3 of a second. So it's very, very quick, that landing and takeoff. And so what we need to make sure is we've got not only the strength in the calf, but we've also got that explosive ability or that ability to generate force rapidly. And when we're doing a calf raise, a 3-second calf raise, up and down there is nothing like when we're running and landing and hitting the ground. And we can see, for those that can, we'll also link to the blog there for all the podcast listeners. But we've got a graph there that shows the progression of load from, what a calf raise replicates there. And a single leg calf raise is nowhere near the demand that running places on it. In fact, a jump is getting pretty close to it. So, jumping up as high as you can in the air on double leg is getting close to running, and a single leg is exceeding it. So this is one of the things that we want to start to incorporate into our rehab.
So that would be, you do the strength work first to build up the strength, and then you would move to this.
Yeah, and sometimes, so this is what we call plyometric exercise. And we have a look on the slides there as well. So we can see in further detail, there's lots of different progression of exercises there, and that's something that our listeners can use as well. But we want to start to move into plyometric exercise, and plyometric exercises can actually be started early on in the process as well. Okay. So depending on tolerance, we don't have to wait until you've got full strength to then start to do plyometrics. We can do them from the start. So an example of some plyometric exercises can be a really good starting point of what's called pulses. And what pulses are, they're just doing a calf raise, but doing it at a faster rate. So that might be, if you're standing with some support here and a single leg calf raise is just nice and slow, pulses are actually going up and down really quickly, and you can vary the speed and the depth of those as well. Basically pulsing up and down there, and usually going about 15 reps, and you really feel the burn with that, actually going those quick contractions. So they're a really good start point. And then you can move on to things like jumping up on top of a step, so jumping up on both feet, and then you can do landing on both feet, and then you can progress to jumping up on single leg, landing on single leg, and then you can go into more things like, a hop for distance or, triple hop for distance, those sort of things. Really, they're a lot more demanding because they require you to land and explode. And other things like drop jumps and drop hops as well are good to use for that. So plyometrics are something that is
they're good for all runners to incorporate anyway.
Absolutely, they are. And this is sort of I guess sometimes can be a gateway moment for some runners when they come in with these injuries, and you're like, this is what you need to be doing to get over this injury, but it's also something that's going to help you recover, help you with your performance and also with injury prevention down the track. And so it's a lot easier for them once they've done it. They're like, oh, these aren't too bad now, and they can continue with them. So very good point. So that's the issue there with just doing calf raises. So the strength and also the rate as well. So the third thing that we find is that they basically, runners can go off a time-based versus a criteria-based. And so they sort of think, I've done my calf, I'm just going to give this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I might do some strength, and they may even be doing that right strength there, but then they're not ticking the boxes to ensure that they're ready to return to running. And so some of the criteria that we use, so in order to resume running, some of the things that we like to see is, firstly, you need to be walking pain-free. The next thing we like to see is that we use a technology here to measure strength. So we like to make sure that they're within a good range, but then they're also close to from side to side. We do that standing and seated. Then we like to, for those that don't have access to that, 25 plus calf raises, and really for runners, we like to see it is, and this, I challenge all the runners out there listening and viewing on this to do this on themselves. So that's single leg calf raises, making sure you're getting a nice full height, nice and controlled there, and getting 25.
Yeah, so it's not just 25, but after 15, you sort of barely lift it. It's 25 full ones, isn't it?
25. And if you've got someone to help you at home, what you can do is you can have them, with a ruler up there, and you've got to hit that ruler each and every time. So making sure you're getting that good quality out of those ones. So we want to make sure that you're getting that full strength in through there. Then the other one, we've got some other couple of measures there. So calf raise height and a bent knee calf raise height is basically where you stand up on one leg as high as you can, and you hold that position, and you get someone just to measure how high your heel has risen off the ground. Because what we sometimes see with those that don't have good calf strength is that they can't raise up as high. So if we're seeing differences there, then that can be a reflection of that they don't have very good strength in through that. Then we like to see a bent knee calf raise endurance. So basically what that is you get into like a wall sit position up against a wall, and then you're raising up onto the tiptoes and trying to hold that position as long as you can. That's a good burner as well, and can really get into the feeling into the quads as well there. And then we go on to double leg jumping. So going on before, looking at that at the graph there, the escalation in load. So we want to make sure that they can jump without pain. And then that can pretty much get them onto jogging. So that's sort of, but once we've cleared those, then off you go. We can start to resume to jog.
So jogging as in not trying to push the pace.
No, that's right. Just very easy pace, which we generally with a lot of injuries anyway, you're going to bring them back at that slower pace and start to work in a bit of volume again.
Yeah.
Then if we want to get to faster speeds, so sort of where we need to head with faster speeds there, some hopping on the spot. So we want to see that that's pain free and equal, nice same quality. So you're not sort of being really sloppy on that side. Yeah. We want to be able to jump onto a step. So a step's usually about 25 centimetres, so roughly around that. So being able to jump single leg onto a step and doing 10 reps of those.
Wow.
Then being able to land as well from a step, so doing 5 of those. And for some that can be a bit scary, but this is where we sort of work up to some of these things, and a lot of these are built into the rehab of jumping up there. And then we can do our more for what's called horizontal propulsion, so jumping as far forwards as you can. So we want to make sure that that's 10% of either side, and that's a drop jump. That's something that we will measure here, but again, for those at home, a bit hard to do that one. And then we can start doing some striding at faster speeds. So gradually building up those speeds there to up to getting closer to sprinting. And then for those involved in team sports, then that's when we can look at introducing some change of direction and cutting and that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, and that's important for trail runners as well. If they're running on trails, they'll need to ensure that's good too, because you often have to change direction when you're dodging.
That's it, exactly. And going up hills, it's quite challenging on there as well too.
Definitely challenging on the calves.
Yep. So that's definitely something we want to make sure there. And then lastly, then we get into sprinting. So that brings us on to the last mistake that we see is when they get to sort of cleared all those even if they have cleared those criteria, which unlikely they have done all those things by themselves, but even those that have, then they go in, they start back their running.
They go, woohoo! I'm good to go.
I'm home. That's exactly right.
And straight back into their previous mileage.
That's it. They left off 4 weeks ago, and then not to mention all the loss of strength that may have happened in that time and the loss of fitness, but they start back in straight away where they've left off. And as you can imagine, that's a recipe for disaster, either with the calf itself or potentially causing somewhere else. And this is where a really good coach comes into their fore here, because this is where talking and speaking with the treating practitioner together, they can work out a plan. The coach can take over and they say, all right, this is what we're going to do now, and then under their guidance make sure that they're adequately loading. So this is where certainly where the coach can play a good role in here. So just some tips on returning to running. So some things to look for here. So we actually want to avoid too much long, slow, continuous running. So the soleus doesn't particularly like a lot of time on their feet. So for some people, you might have to do more short burst running, but still slow, but having sort of more interval work. So that might be over a couple of 100 meters, then having a bit of a rest and building up that way. So and that's
could that even be included, say, like having a shorter run in the morning and then a shorter run in the evening?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, you can do that. If you want to try and get some more mileage in there, it does sort of allow things to freshen up a bit.
Yeah.
Depends also on what they're doing in that middle time. And if you've got people that are on their feet all day for their work, that's probably not a good idea. And that's for those people, it's better to run in the morning when things are fresher.
Yeah.
And always do your strength work after you've done your running, so that way your carbs are fresh. But that is something you can do. You can incorporate the double run days there. Unfortunately, with calves, you often resume running later than a hamstring. So a hamstring injury, you can sometimes get them back running, 2 days doing a jog. With calves, though, that they can sometimes take weeks. And the prognosis is really dependent on person to person. It depends on the severity of the injury. It depends on what their, pre-existing state is as well. So how strong they are will then dictate how quickly that you think they're going to be back. Whether it's a 2-week injury, whether it's a 6-week injury, that's something you can get a better idea of when you've actually assessed the runner. Avoid the junk time on the legs. So that's what I was saying, like with, keeping off the feet as much as possible. For those that are in team-based sports, after they've done their running, just sit down, don't stand around all for the rest of the training session. And as we mentioned, always program that running before strengthening, and then try and have a day's rest initially when you're coming back as well in between runs, just to give it that chance to refresh, repair, and get ready for the following day. And that's pretty much it.
Excellent. No, so that's we really need to make sure that we're being proactive to deal with the calf injury. Once they're back running and they're back all going, strong, keep up the strength work. Even when everything's good and everything's fine, we can't just go, well, I'm completely cured now.
That's right,
and just drop the calf strengthening. We've got to still work on that.
And especially, like we mentioned, the calves being so important, it is something that really all runners should be doing some work on that anyway. And like I mentioned, it's sometimes the gateway opportunity of once you've got them into these exercises, like now keep going with these, because you're going to see the benefits in terms of, of making sure this doesn't happen again, but then also helping with performance as well. And unfortunately, for the older runners, the masters runners, that becomes even more important because we lose that strength as we get old, and that's why.
And am I correct with masters runners, calf strains are more prevalent?
That's why we call it old man's calf. So it's why, unfortunately, breaking the news to those runners over 40, and then it's like, I'm getting old now. But no, we can turn the clock back, and that's, as I say to them, strength training is a good way to do that.
And strength training is, I'm a big proponent of strength training, and that's definitely a way of doing that. So yes. All right, well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Great, thank you.
And if people are thinking that maybe they've got a calf strain, how can they come and get into contact with you?
Yeah, so they can certainly find me through social media, through our Health High Performance, at Health High Performance, or at Sports Chiro Luke, or they can look us up through our web, www.healthhp.com.au.
And of course, I'll put all the links in the show notes, and they'll be here on social media as well. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks as well. Thanks for having me back again. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.